As I think back to my early days working on WordPress websites, this was one of the keys that led me down the path to Sucuri, a company I co-founded a decade ago. We were trying to solve a problem for our clients. How can we keep remote monitoring on a site that would give us indicators of compromise? How can we minimize the time that a website was infected with malware or even down because of a server issue? First is to know, second is to react, but best is to protect altogether. We created a monitoring solution, which led to remediation, which eventually led to web application firewall to protect sites from attacks completely. We scaled, which led to growth. Today, that technology is owned by GoDaddy and protects hundreds of thousands of websites. Let's get right into it as we get ready to hear from one of Sucuri's very own, Victor Santoyo. Victor is a very technical security professional and has been with Sucuri for more than 6 years. He has been the focal point of helping pros and agencies alike, so you're going to want to dig in. In this session, you'll learn how to set up the baseline e-commerce solutions your clients expect, as well as how to help your clients profit from a fully secured online experience. Please welcome Victor Santoyo.
Hey everyone, welcome to Maximizing Website Security for you, your clients, and your business. Going into day 2, you've learned quite a bit already, I imagine. But today, in my session, we're going to focus on an aspect of your online business that not a lot of people put time or investment into, and that's website security. I get it, it's a scary topic, and not a lot of people like talking about it. I'm going to try and simplify this as best as possible, in reality to just provide you the best understanding of the risks and the benefits to making sure that you are utilizing something in terms of website security and what you can translate that into your clients and your business, all aspects of your life. Before going into that, I like to share a little bit about myself, to get to know me and where I come from. I am Victor Santoyo. I come from the company Sucuri. I am father of 2 boys, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. I'm also the fur father of 2 cats and a dog, and a gardener in training. I've recently joined my wife in investing a lot of sweat and time into our front and backyard, but it's been a really enriching process. And if it's something that's, has been appealing to you, I promise it is something really fulfilling, especially as you head into different parts of the season and see these things grow and flourish. Anyway, to the topic at hand here, website security. What is it? By definition, website security is all about making sure that we can monitor, detect issues, protect your website, and respond in the event of an incident. Now, a lot of people read that, can't make A's or B's of it, and at the end of the day, this is really just about keeping all of the bad stuff away from your website. How do we do this? Well, throughout the presentation, we're going to go through a number of line items and things you can do. Now, there will be a checklist, an audit checklist, more specifically, that you'll have available to you that will help you kind of guide you line by line in terms of things you can action, whether it's yourself or delegate that to somebody else on your side, so that you can absolutely make sure that you are checking off all those boxes so you are helping detect, protect, and respond in the event of a security incident. What does that actually mean in terms of a security incident? Well, for most people, you're expecting something in the form of a big red screen appearing on your browser, something like this. People see this, they dive right out, right? It's 2021, and most people understand that when you're seeing some kind of an error, and of course, color-coded errors, the redder they are, the worse it appears, people are not going to feel comfortable or confident that this is a website they should be following. So they're going to leave. Terrible for your presence, terrible for your SEO, among other things. So how do we stay away from a result like this? Well, website security is composed of several core tenets. We'll go through some of these now, and I'll go briefly about what they are and dive a little bit further. But these right here are the 5 main aspects of website security that I have found over the years and working at Sucuri are most important and valuable towards prioritizing your time to. Now, first things first is detection. Visibility, just understanding what's going on. The next thing is protection, in terms of actually having a proactive layer in place so that you're not waiting inevitably for the next bad thing to happen. Afterwards, it's response. So you're faced with an issue. Maybe it's not as critical as some other things, but what are some of the actions you can employ to make sure that you're responding in a timely and effective fashion? Afterwards, we'll speak a little bit about clients, the relationships. What are the consequences and the impacts of talking security to your clients? And afterwards, best practices. These best practices will not only apply to website security. In reality, website security is actually quite synonymous with some other aspects of your online presence, right? Accessing particular vendors and systems. There are going to be some common threads that you can practice every day in certain other areas of your life from website security tenets. So first things first, detection, visibility. One of the biggest feedback I get from the clients that I work with on a daily basis is that they simply did not have a full understanding of the issues they were facing, and more importantly, of the inventory they were managing. So one of the things I heavily recommend is ensuring that you dedicate some time, whether it's yourself or of others, to have a feel for what exactly are you managing from a software perspective. How much in terms of plugins are you actually utilizing? And how many sites and installations you have in your environments? Oftentimes we get hack cases where they'll tell me, hey, I'm actively managing over 10 to 15 sites. That's absolutely what I've got in there. And then we find several core installations of WordPress buried in subdirectories deep that they had forgotten about in months, which may have likely been a culprit and a reason why things happened. So let's go over some of the key questions you should be asking yourself and others in terms of what should we be helping identify and help in terms of providing some level of detection for, right? People often get really click happy in terms of having the ability to, hey, look, that's a cool new feature on this new plugin. That's really awesome. I want to try that. That plays really well. My clients are going to love this new thing. And we're often always testing and, always getting feedback and, disabling one, enabling another, forgetting that if you're not going to use something, you might as well lose it, right? There's no reason to increase the risk of having an outdated plugin, have an exploit discovered weeks later that may absolutely compromise your entire environment, everything you put your time into. That happens a lot more often than people realize. Hey, I forgot about this site, clients stopped paying me, whatever the case is. If you're not going to utilize or actively manage or monitor something or actively update something, then absolutely do your best to try and remove that. If you're going to be downloading new software, make sure that this is software that you trust, that this is something that that the developers that you're downloading from obviously have an ongoing presence in updating, because that means that they're also monitoring their code. They're also looking to make sure that what they're providing you as a resource is safe. All right. So some of the other things as well is making sure that if you have the ability to make sure that you have a handle on your inventory, list out per client what's being managed, what's being used. And if you don't need to have a need for it, then disable it or just get rid of it. And of course, update, making sure that not only do you have a handle on what's going on, but you have some procedure in place to execute updates and detect when a new update is available so you can make those actions. And that's not just on your part, but again, doing some of that 10-second research as you're looking for new software, new themes, seeing that, hey, the developers just recently updated this, so they're prioritizing security to some extent. Again, they're monitoring their stuff. That means that is something with less risk, right? Risk minimization is the biggest key thing here, right? If I don't have, if all of my doors are closed, it's less likelihood that someone's going to walk in and, come into my house unannounced. But if I have them all open, it's an open invitation, right? So especially since I don't have the eyes to watch every single opening in my home. Now, I understand this often ends up being really difficult. And even just understanding, well, I don't have a way to do this. I don't have a way with maybe hundreds of clients that I'm working with. I don't have the time or the personnel to keep up with this. How do I fix this? Well, again, a common issue. That's fine. One of the things then in those cases that you should absolutely then at least invest some time and money into is a protective layer. Something that'll proactively block threats from impacting your websites. And this is going to be the key thing. If you don't have the time to keep up with updates because you have a lot of customization requests, or simply you just don't, there are only so many hours in the day, then we want to maximize your time by putting in something that can do the work for you. And when it comes to protection and it comes to your website, essentially a website firewall will be the key here. And benefits of the firewall are many. I'll go over some of the core benefits here, though, in terms of what a firewall can do for you, again, to give you back some time to get back to some of the things that you're actually really good at, whether it's selling, whether it's reaching out to new markets, or whatever the case may be. But this will be something that'll be really critical if you're not already doing something, or at the very least, making sure you have a plan for. Now, the best website firewalls are going to be agnostic, meaning really flexible with the type of software that they're going to be able to help for. Whether you choose to stay on something as popular as WordPress now, maybe you move to something, like a Drupal or Magento type installation. Maybe you built out your own custom application. But if the best website firewalls will be able to kind of adjust for that and, kind of roll with the punches in terms of saying, hey, no, it doesn't matter what technology your website's built on, we'll still be able to accommodate that. The other thing is as well is making sure that these website firewalls are good at blocking the stuff that you need to, right? So whether that's bad bots, making sure that you have something in place that'll get rid of all of that noise. Most of the attempts that are made maliciously against websites are not anything that one person is exercising. They're often botnet type attempts where you may have someone who's executed a task to, let's say, hit a particular inventory of websites, and then all of a sudden they're, finding themselves with a list of sites that they know are vulnerable because they're running on a specific version of the core, and then those are running a specific plugin. Like those combinations of things often end up being one of the main reasons why people like a small coffee shop finds themselves hacked. And they're like, well, I'm simply serving coffee and baked goods. How am I a target? You weren't specifically. You were just running on technology that's commonly used, and that's what they're exploiting. Bots do this. They just seek out that, that common thread of technology, and your site may be one of those things. Again, it's not personal. It's simply something that happens. Now, beyond that, of course, you want the firewall to be available, making sure that whether, there's something that they're always going to be running, that there's not going to be any limitation in terms of what they're going to be able to provide you. Most website firewalls, if you do your homework, will have some component of what's known as a content delivery network for CDN, caching, speed optimization, essentially, right? These are things you hear about all the time. Most website firewalls are built in with this or have an option for it. Those are the ones I would recommend because not only will they keep your site safe, but at the end of the day, they can also make sure that you remain up. And more importantly, especially with some cloud type website firewalls, they can absorb a lot of that bad noise for you. You'll find plugins that are really helpful in terms of, blocking for certain things, and that's good. But do your homework. If you would have a lot of heavy traffic, a lot of plugins are dependent on your resources to function. And if your server, your environment isn't equipped to handle that, then that's something you need to consider. Cloud-based may be a better approach for you there. If you're not as heavy on the traffic, then that's fine. Everyone's got their own preference on that point. But do your homework on that. Availability may be a key thing for you. That's something you may want to consider. And of course, application profiling. Again, understanding behavior. The best website firewalls will describe the fact that not only will they work with the best technology, but they can also anticipate things on a behavioral level. So understanding, hey, this particular visitor is coming to my website, but they're trying to run something or access a subfolder that isn't something any normal visitor would access. That seems suspicious. Maybe we should block that by default. And a website firewall will automatically do that for you without you needing to get involved. So these are some of the things that, like, again, like these are automatic attempts to block known malicious or potentially suspicious behavior. The best ones will do this. And if you can do your homework enough, you'll find that a lot of time will save you on making sure you don't always have to be up to date with the newest trends of malware or new exploits. 0-day vulnerabilities are those new disclosures that people often hear about. You'll get a social share on, hey, anybody running on this version of something, you need to update right away. It's been this big, massive thing like with the Microsoft Exchange recently. Those are disclosures. Those are 0-day type of vulnerabilities that get disclosed. And then this is some terminology you should become familiar with. Website firewalls by and large should be able to accommodate that by either having the staff available on the vendor side to say, hey, yeah, we'll always be ready for those. Or they'll tell you, actually, we have mechanisms in place to produce rules or proactively detect that type of malicious behavior, regardless of whether or not you're on that outdated software, right? Because you're running behind because of how much you're managing or how little time you have. So these are the kinds of benefits on the edges, on the fringes that can help you. And again, just that peace of mind, knowing that you have a proactive layer in place so that you don't have to worry. An alarm system in place. I know that there's a less of a likelihood that someone's going to attempt to break in my car if I actually hit the alarm button on my way to the store. Things like that, right? It's just knowing, okay, I feel better now knowing, boom, there's a layer in front. So those are those type of things. And that's just your website, right? Let's talk about the accessing of the systems on your way to your website. How do we protect against stuff like that? And at the end of the day, it's just having the due diligence of making sure multi-factor authentication and all these other components are absolutely in place for you. And I listed a couple of things here in terms of how I speak to that. But the key thing is, it's not simply that attackers are going to focus and key in on your website. They may key in on, the access to your host, your cPanel. They may access your email. They may access, other areas of your online presence that often get interconnected, right? Because most people, let's say, may access or log in to different systems by just say, hey, log in with your email. But if your email's hacked, well, all of a sudden this guy's got access to all kinds of stuff that you're managing online, right? So making sure you do have multi-factor in place everywhere as much as possible. Yes, the time sometimes it takes to wait for a code or that whole thing may appear intrusive or inconvenient, right? You often see this or, whatever the case is, you have to wait for that 6-digit token on the right side. But the little time you spend on this can save you the hours, the days of a headache where someone may have hacked in to gain personal information on you, your clients, or anyone else involved. This goes above that, right? This isn't just, oh, my website is just a landing page, but there are systems above that, right? Where your site's hosted and your file structure that shares sensitive information. And you don't want someone inadvertently getting in because you either fail to activate something like this, you utilize bad passwords, something else we'll kind of expand on further down the line. But these are the kinds of things you have to think about beyond just the website, right? Like who's got quick access to your MacBook or your desktop, whatever the case is. Think at that level, right? Where else can someone potentially access sensitive information? Now, that's not to say that you have all these proactive layers in place that you're perfectly fine. In truth, this is really minimizing your risk. One of the things I tell people a lot is you can reduce risk as much to zero as possible, but there's no eliminating it completely. At the end of the day, stuff happens, and worst case scenarios always present themselves, whether it's your fault or otherwise. So you have to be ready for the worst case scenario, right? No one ever expects that their house, that their car is going to be the one that's broken into or whatnot, but these things happen from time to time. You read about it all the time. So making sure that you're prepared with a checklist of action items in the event of a worst case scenario is going to be the next big thing that you need to worry about. So knowing who to call, when they're available, how much it's going to cost, who do I need to notify? These are some of the things you need to already have in the back of your mind. So if you can proactively create these steps, it's less time you're panicking and worrying after the fact. I had a case once where a small web agency went off on vacation during Memorial Day weekend. It was a 4 or 5 day vacation for them. And as soon as they got to the hotel, they were notified by a host, hey, these 8 to 10 sites have been infected. We have to shut these sites down. These were high paying clients. And so instead of spending time with family on this vacation, this man had come to me already about 36 hours after the fact, looking for a solution because he hadn't even done the legwork to even know who to call, what to do, could he DIY it, all these little things. So imagine you're losing all that time, not just from the business perspective, but at home, right? Again, these are consequences that kind of compound each other at some point. And so then you lose out on all that, plus the stress and the money and all that. So that's someone who wasn't prepared and who's prepared now, but they weren't before. And that's just one example of many over my years that I've heard. So what are some of the things you should be absolutely ready for and anticipate? So in the event of a worst case scenario, your website's hacked, make sure that you already have or have in place to reach out to a solution that offers malware remediation, malware removal. So making sure that you can actually get someone who is proficient or capable of going in, removing all the bad stuff or undoing it, whatever those circumstances may be, so that you're back up and running in a very timely fashion. Blacklist removal is also key. Depending on the severity or how badly the infection's taken place, either across one site or several, you may have already been flagged by several blacklists. Google, of course, being the most popular, right? Generates that big red screen that we saw earlier, but there are others. And sometimes they impact mailing blacklists as well, depending on the type of malware that's already been introduced. So understanding you have a way to account for that, who can help you with that, in terms of identifying who has listed me where, and then requesting a delist is key. And of course, having someone who can provide you some post-hack, actions and things you can do to make sure you're in a better position to succeed down the line. Now, I think more simply, there's a graphic here that's really helpful in terms of understanding the cyclical nature of how these things happen, right? First, you respond. There's an incident, right? I actually did the legwork, so I know who to call. I know who to notify, who to pay, whatever the case is. And I got to tell them, hey, I'm hacked. We got to get this back up and running. Great. So we did that. So now we got to recover. Now we have to figure out, who do we tell? Do we got to notify our clients? Do we have to revert to backups? Did the malware do any damage in terms of some of the time we spent in the code already that it's already been undone? What do we need to do to recover to make sure we're back at least near the position we were prior? Review what happened. Okay, great. So we're back in the position we were, and this security vendor told me these are the issues that happened. But what can we do, and what happened that we can kind of take forward in making sure that this doesn't happen again, right? And then of course, take the measures and actually take those measures and employ them, right? Actually mitigate these things, improve on whatever happened, right? If it was a bad password, reset everything, make them strong, make them complex, make them unique, all that. If it's anything in terms of like, say, the bad inventory that you weren't, detecting properly and, being diligent about, great. So let's review what we have and let's get loose stuff that we're not already, actively kind of keeping our eyes on, because obviously that wasn't important. It wasn't a priority. And then we can get back to a spot where we kind of reset. Now, months or years may pass by and the same thing may happen, right? Because tactics and techniques change all the time. And that ends up being one of the biggest things people, I think, misjudge. It's like, oh, well, I just need someone to clean it up and maybe harden a few things and I'll be set. But that accounts for the way they did it today. It doesn't account for how they'll do it tomorrow, right? You can't predict the unknowns, right? You don't know what they are. So this is just a cycle that you'll always go through. And these are things you can kind of take away just in general, right? Like, hey, if someone's got, if I got presented an issue at home in terms of, let's say, a home leak, I got to recover, I got to clean up, I got to get someone to fix it. I got to figure out how the leak happened so that doesn't happen again. But that leak may happen in another part of the house that I wasn't expecting it to. And I'll go through the same process all over again, right? So this is something that I'll apply to website security as well. And I think the most important key here as we go into the next section is, how does this impact the relationship with your clients? How do you communicate with your clients on something like this? I'll speak pretty briefly on this, but I think one of the key takeaways that I want people to understand is transparency will always be the best policy here. If you have an incident, let them know right away. Hey, look, something happened, but I'm on it. If you're going to figure out a way to incorporate security, understanding the value of it, right? At the beginning of the relationship with your clients, I think it's also important to be transparent about what you're capable of. Hey, I'm not a security expert. I want to help manage your site. I want to help build out the best online presence for you. I can absolutely skyrocket your SEO in certain areas, and I can do all this kind of cool stuff. But one of the things I'm going to ask you to commit to, as part of my proposal is security. Because I don't have the time in the event that something really bad happens to go in and fix it. So I've included this line item here for security because if the worst case scenario happens, this is the process and what it's going to look like. And oftentimes that helps because just understanding what you're capable of and limited to then allows you to get the help you need. And a client kind of understanding, hey, yeah, I get that. That makes sense. I can't expect you to do everything, although some do. But, for those that are a bit more understanding on that, if you're just open about it from the beginning, there's no surprises, right? You've set an expectation. Hey, look, I'm not a security guy, so I can't do this if something happens. And especially if, let's say, depending on the sensitivity or the size of the project, that may become even more critical. So in a situation like that, be transparent. When those bad instances happen, keep them informed. Look, in reality, as we're kind of navigating a world where we're kind of abiding by not just PCI, but GDPR and all these things. These are kind of the monitoring, requirements that are already in place, right? You have to notify. And these are the types of things that happen. But it's also important before you even get this ship started to understand why that's really important. It's not just because, I have to check this line item off on an audit. It's setting an expectation. And that way, if the worst case scenario happens, and let's say somebody told me, hey, look, there was an issue, but I'm on it. It's going to take about a couple of days. Remember that company I had mentioned at the very beginning? They're the same ones I'm going to be using for this. As I get updates, you'll get updates. Great. So, and that should help, in terms of emboldening that trust, because then when you do recover and you're back at a point where you're post mitigating those actions and all that, they know, okay, yeah, they absolutely had me covered. They had me back up versus some cases that I hear where clients are moaning and groaning for weeks, not knowing when their site's going to be back up. Man, this mail list has been blocking me. I can't send email. The panic from a client translates to you. That panic translates to the people you talk to. I feel that every week. So, the transparency, that helps you provide some calm too. All right. Now, what are some of the best practices that can apply to everything we've touched on so far, right? Look, I think I've already alluded to the fact that this is beyond just your files and database. There are a lot of areas that are sensitive, that are potential, exploit avenues for attackers. This is a good quote that I like from Tim Cook. If you put a key under the mat for the cops, a burglar can find it too. And if they know there's a key hidden somewhere, they're not going to stop until they find it. And they're not going to stop until they find a new technique, a new tactic, a new method in which they can get in there, especially if the size of the home is really big, right? WordPress is very popular. People often say, it's less secure because it's just a less secure platform. Well, no, it's just a bigger target. It's an easier target because there's so many WordPress websites out there, as an example. So burglars know that that's an easier thing to hit because of how much of a market share they take up. So if you're one of those that utilize something very popular, right? I'm talking themes, I'm talking plugins and all that. This falls in that line too, right? If it's something that everyone's using, I guarantee you there's somebody out there trying to figure out a way to get in, because that means that person can hit the most amount of people possible. I'm not trying to scare you. I'll be clear here. But this is just the reality of things sometimes. So employing best practices across every online avenue that you have access to will be critical. Now, we'll go into a couple things first, right? Data privacy. These are things, of course, has been a big topic as of late. Some best practices that are going to be here that also kind of help in terms of making sure that you have everyone in line with the type of conversations we should be having and preparing for when we're building out sites and stuff, right? I won't read through the entire list of questions here, but I want you to kind of look through this very briefly and understand that this is something really important, as CCPA just became a thing. And, I imagine this is only going to evolve more and more and more, especially with the number of breaches that everyone's constantly hearing about. Just having answers to these questions and creating habits and best practices for how to address them, right? Who is responsible? Who has access? Who do we limit access to for certain data, right? Like, how do we make sure that someone who isn't supposed to have access does? Or, and all that, and those types of things, right? Like, if I've got someone who's working on design, for building out images and video, they shouldn't be in my database being able to, handle all my SQL code or whatnot, right? That doesn't translate, doesn't make sense. That goes into some of the line items here as well, in terms of data management. So understanding, if you have clients that are asking who has access to my data and why you're using it, and then answering after that, right, well, these are the people who have access and this is how I'm limiting access. Key. And again, transparency, making sure that you're telling your clients and exposing them to some extent, hey, look, these are the people involved in your project. And these are the people that will only have access to information here and there. Because then it also sets an expectation that if something goes wrong, who was involved in certain areas and how we can make sure that it helps save us time as to, okay, who is touching this? Who is handling that? Why didn't we catch that? If you have these answers already in place, then it makes it really, really easy for you to kind of narrow your focus, your time, and your efforts into, going back to recover, to review, and to mitigate, right? Going back to that cycle, making sure that's something you're always constantly working on. And most importantly, password management. This feels like beating on a dead horse. People say this ad nauseum. I get it. But I still get people who will email me their passwords. And then upon seeing this password to access their cPanel, ends up being something along the lines of, John Oliver 1968. So having some type of a tool in place is going to be really critical here in terms of making sure that, again, you're saving yourself time, so you're not having to worry about how many passwords am I going to be juggling. I don't even know where I put my notepad where I jotted all these down. I don't know what text file on my desktop I saved them to. I personally use LastPass. There are some other ones out there, KeePass, and some others that are helpful as well. But just my experience, my comfort level, LastPass is something I'm very happy with. And most of these password managers are going to accomplish the same thing, right? They can handle storing all of your, all the passwords into different systems. And sometimes maybe the same system, but for different people, and having a better way to label and categorize that. All of that locked behind a master password. And these are things that can be accessed not just as a add-on to your browser, but to your phone, right? And it makes it really easy while I'm on the go, if I'm on a flight, or whatever the case may be, that if I need to remember the secure password to somebody, I can log in real quick or share that password, let's say with another team member who may need to action something on my behalf in a secure fashion, right? And then afterwards, I can disable access or reset the password and all that. And you'll see there in some of the screenshots, some of the cool ways they do that, right? You can dictate length of the password, the complexity of it with capitalization, symbols and all that. And again, this is not just something for websites. This can be for your banks, your bank accounting stuff, for just managing, going on to Amazon or Best Buy or all these other online retailers. Yeah, these are things you can position. I myself have about, I think, 97 different passwords into logins for stuff on my own, right? And I'm not even managing clients from a web agency perspective. So I can't even imagine some of these others that are working with hundreds and hundreds of clients. That's impossible to do on your own or even with a team, especially when you're trying to minimize risk as much as possible. And passwords are often the biggest thing. Okay. And so with that, I leave you and say thank you. I hope you've taken enough away in terms of just understanding some of the beginning steps. And again, you'll have an audit checklist you can refer back to that'll take you through some of the things you can do in terms of understanding what you have, what you need. Are you doing what's necessary to really minimize the risk, right? That's all this is about. As someone with experience in terms of working with web providers, transparency will always be the biggest thing that carries weight, right? Tell your clients ahead of time, hey, these are my limitations. This is what we'll need. This is what to expect. The same thing goes for your team. Understanding, hey guys, look, we're going to be managing a lot of projects, but if something goes wrong, we need to know. We need to have a plan, an ability to respond, who to reach out to, and exercise these actions in a timely fashion. All right. With that, enjoy the rest of Expand and safe browsing out there.